Okay, so let's go to slide 9 now in your slide deck. Neural processing, step 4. Okay, let's go to step 4, right? What is the process involved in neural processing? So once a bit of energy has been transduced into a neural signal, right? So let's take vision again. So photons of light hit one of the cones, or millions of the cones in the back of your eye, and those cones are activated in a pattern that corresponds to what you're looking at. What happens next, right? Well, neural processing is what happens as the changes get transmitted through the massively complex network of neurons. So you have this massive connection of neurons starting in your retina. The rods and cones all relay to different types of cells that we're going to talk about: bipolar cells, ganglion cells. Ultimately, these cells bundle up into the optic nerve and go out the back of your eye into your brain. They go into different parts of your hindbrain and your midbrain, which we're going to talk about. And ultimately, this information ends up in the occipital lobe of your cortex, which is in the back of your head here. The occipital lobe, that's the visual cortex, where a lot of more sophisticated visual processing occurs. And also in the temporal lobe, which is here, and the parietal lobes, which is here on the side, right? These are different parts of your brain that are involved in detecting different patterns and different objects in the environment. Slide 10 in your slide deck, which is a representation of figure 1-4, sort of covers all of this, right? So over on the left-hand side of that slide, you'll see a cartoon drawing of the way your rods and cones are wired up to the network of other neurons inside your retina, which is in the back of your eye. And then in the middle of that slide, you'll see this drawing of your brain. So the brain is actually looking, I guess if you're looking at the slide, it's going to be looking off to your right. It would be a person kind of looking off to the right, like this. And so you're looking at a side view of the brain, right? So the pink part is the cortex, and the yellow colored part would be the brain stem, and then there's a little gray thing hanging underneath the pink, which is your cerebellum, which is back here, right back here. But that's where all the neural processing takes place, is within all of this structure of going all the way from the retina into your brain, into these different areas of your brain. Of course, once you perceive something, once it makes its way into your brain, we got to do something with it. And that's where we behave, where we do something. The final stages of the process are where we react to things. Perception is a conscious experience. So in other words, unless you're conscious of having experienced a stimulus, then it hasn't been perceived, right? Obviously, right? I mean, if there's all kinds of things going on around us that we're not conscious of because we're not paying attention to them, and they're not impinging on us, right? So as a simple example, I could cover my eyes like this, right, and I would not be perceiving my computer screen here in front of me, or a lot of other things. So once we're conscious of something, then the next stage is recognition, right? So that's when we give something a name, right? So you recognize computer, you recognize, computer mouse, you recognize, all kinds of things, right? There's every object that we perceive with our vision is given a name. Interestingly enough, if something doesn't have a word, it doesn't exist, right? But we automatically place things into categories. Automatically. It's something that our brains do as a matter of course. And then finally we can emit actions, right? We can emit behaviors. A perceiver can emit a behavior toward something that it's recognized, right? So if I'm thirsty, if I want a cup of coffee and I'm thirsty, I'll pick up my cup of coffee. I'll see my cup of coffee, and then I'll initiate a behavior towards it, and I'll pick it up, right? So all of this happens together, right? And this is all the process of perception and sensation and perception. And it constitutes the vast bulk of what we're going to learn about in this course this semester, right? Slide 12 in your slide deck, which is a picture from your book, Figure 1-5, gives a very simple cartoon viewing, right, of this relationship between perception, recognition, and action, right? So this dude's walking around, he says, I see something, and he says, it's an oak tree, and then let's take a closer look, right? So all of this is this represents the processes that we're going to talk about. Now, one of the things I want you to keep in mind during the semester is, as we're going through this, right, and I'm going to repeat this over and over again, and you look at this picture, right, and you think, well, that's kind of lame. I mean, this is what we're going to talk about, really? I mean, this doesn't look very complicated. Well, it is. Understanding the processes that underlie perception in this slide, if you look at the slide, perception, recognition, and action. Understanding the processes that underlie those sub-processes is extremely complex. There's a lot going on. And the reason we don't think it's complex is because we do all this stuff automatically. This is stuff we do unconsciously, automatically every day, right? I mean, every day you get out of bed, you get ready for work, you go to work, you do your day, and you interact with people. You do all of this stuff automatically, and we don't think about it. Now, what this course is going to do is going to have you think about it. We're going to be breaking down the processes that underlie perception, recognition, and action. And I want you to understand that they are very complex. If you've ever talked to a robotics researcher or people who build machines that do these things, they'll be the first group of folks that'll tell you how hard this is. It's very hard. The next slide, figure 13, it's a really interesting slide, right? So if you kind of look at it, right, you can kind of look at it and see a bunch of different and see some different things depending on what your perception, depending on what you're expecting to see, right? Immediately you might see a mouse, right, with the little ears, the little round ears and the whiskers. But if I were to turn this drawing ever so slightly, and then tell you a different story about this picture, you would see a picture of an old man, right? You'd see the glasses with the nose and the ear, right? So the mouse ears are the glasses, and the hind leg of the mouse becomes the ear of the old man, right? So I can actually alter your perception of this picture by telling you different stories about it, whether it's a story about an old man or a story about a mouse, and by slightly moving it a little bit, I can alter your perception, right? Our ability to perceive is based very strongly on what we expect to see in the context. Okay, it's another thing that another core concept you have got to understand about sensation and perception. Context and expectation are huge. And that's important because a lot of people think that you're kind of like, that we kind of operate like, like a video camera, right? You've got your little tape running in your head, and your eyes are kind of your camera, and you're just kind of recording stuff, and you're recording stuff that you're recording things as they are. But in fact, our perceptions are constructed for us moment by moment, second by second. And part of that construction is dependent upon what we expect to see, or what we expect to hear, what we expect, okay? And what we've experienced in the past. We do not perceive things as they are. We perceive what we expect to perceive. And you're going to see that a lot when we learn about vision. When we learn about hearing and language processing, you're going to learn that a lot of the things that we perceive are based upon what our expectations are.